Russian invasion. Obviously, being here, one of the first interesting aspects about the invasion was that everybody, all these different Europeans from different countries had all resoundingly agreed. Oh, God damn, we are not ready for this. We being Americans, we were ready for this because obviously that's what half of our society dreams about, you know, Red Dead Redemption type stuff. But they're not ready for this in any capacity. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to one of these German security specialists. So my background is I study security policy. So it's like political science is blanket and I study security policy. So the one European individual, he was German, we were talking in a bar one day. He'd specialized in security and he had said, yeah, I don't think the Americans really have a good idea about the extent to which corruption had plagued a lot of European militaries. And I said, what specifically are you referring to? And he said, well, here's the thing. Let's take a attack helicopter. And I was like, okay, that's a very weird metric. You know, some people measure their military success in different ways, but sure, let's just use a attack helicopter as a reference. And he said, no, you don't understand. Statistically, we have 0 attack helicopters because corruption had plagued our system. We have absolutely nothing. So then I was thinking, okay, what does this equal? What does this mean? He said, well, all European nations are likely going to increase their military budgets probably by double as a result of this. Now, granted, that's the equivalent of jumping up to like 4% of their GDP, whereas the US, it's roughly about 50%, a little over 50%. I think it's about 50, 60% last I checked, ballpark, and about half of that military budget goes to private contracting companies. Fun fact. I'll get into that in a different video. And so he said, well, we have to understand the fact that if all European security forces combined cannot stop a theoretical Russian invasion. Now, we have the idea of nukes and things like that. We really don't know how that's going to play out. You have tactical nukes. Would we engage in some sort of nuclear operations if Russia's already through the borders of, say, like Norway, by example? These are all different questions that nobody really has answers to. We had individuals speak with us from the French Ministry of Defense. We had all these different security personnel coming in and having conversations with us about these very exact things. Now, one thing that I do think it is important for me to tell Americans out there, and I cannot say the name of the person, I think I will get in trouble for this, but one NATO security personnel who is European had stated very specifically that Europe is trying to eventually wean themselves off of the US and have their own European NATO and kick the United States out. Now, do I blame them for this because of the fact that a lot of these European countries have different conceptions about what they want to do with Ukraine? No, I don't blame anybody. I don't blame anybody. I think the United States needs to focus on improving our infrastructure and reducing the violence and the poverty and the drugs and everything back in the States. Okay, we don't need to be dealing with all of these different countries. Why doesn't Europe just deal with their own affairs a little bit more than the US is dealing with their affairs for them? Okay, you see my political stance with that. But this was a good point. And I thought, well, that's interesting. When are they planning to do this? And this official had said within the decade. So what I'm trying to say is, even though I cannot tell you the specific person, keep that in the back of your mind. Just keep that in mind. Okay, now let's go into speaking with Zelensky. By the way, if I keep like coughing on the side, it's literally from the virus. I'm still not 100% over that. So, meeting with Zelensky. He went on this entire tour, meeting with different students for the Ukrainian cause, and he was doing this through Zoom. Now, the first group of students that he had met with in the world were us. I don't know how France pulled some political connections to make it happen, but it was cool. If I have footage, like I have like little quick videos of just a few of us chatting with him, I'll put it on the screen right now, but you get the idea. It was cool to meet him. It was funny. Behind the scenes, before the cameras had actually started rolling and everything else, he was he was focused on how his arms looked, the depth of his arms on camera. So he would kind of like, he would posture his arms and like look at his arms, and then he'd look through the camera, and then he would like flex for a second, and then he would kind of like bring his shoulders back and like turn his arms. So he was doing this for about 5 minutes. Look, I don't blame the guy. It was just a funny thing. It was like, oh, look at that. you're human too. You're trying to put up this masculine front. I don't blame you. I'd probably do the same thing, but that was funny as hell because it's like, hey man, we can see you. Like we're watching you this whole time. But anyway, that was a good experience. There wasn't anything I could really take away from it that you guys don't already know. A lot of it was just dehumanizing the Russians and so on. Again, I don't really blame them, but it was a lot of their animals. I don't really know some of the allegations that he had made, if they were correct, so I'm hesitant to say. But one thing I will say is he was saying that there are multiple instances where Russian soldiers would allegedly take babies and, I don't know if I can say the RAPE, I don't know if I'm going to get censored for that or not. These babies, assault them in front of their parents and then would unalive the parents after unaliving the baby, things like that. So he would go in a lot of different stories like that. They could be true, they could be not. There's not really any way to prove it, frankly, and that's why I'm hesitant to talk more about it. But it was a very good experience. He was a very stoic, serious guy. He actually asked us questions about what we would recommend to do to reach out to the youth, and how to platform himself, like how we would recommend he approach these types of conversations with the younger generations, and he would actually have a back and forth with us about that, and that was an interesting tactic. That's a lot of these different world leaders that I've seen have a similar tactic in the European, Western Europe, but also especially in Eastern Europe. A lot of the individuals will have back and forth conversations a lot more frankly than we see in the States. So that was cool. It was a cool experience. Interesting guy. I will likely, if I know I'm not going to get trouble, I'll give you more details about what this, how I got into this meeting, got accepted for it, and so on and so forth. I would say the more fascinating feature of Zelensky and what he was saying was more of just his demeanor. Obviously, he's a very stone cold and stoic individual, but man, this dude was vicious. A lot of times when we see him on camera, he's very regimented and very focused, but the intensity in his eyes was something to behold. But anyway, there's not a lot to that part of that. There's not a lot to that aspect of the Russian invasion. It was a cool experience. I'm not going to use this as some clickbait because I'm not talking about it a lot, but you get the idea. I just wanted to mention that this was something that had happened. This is something that he's attempting to do, and it was a cool experience for a lot of the younger folks. Does it change my opinion about Ukraine and Russia and things like that? No, it doesn't. It doesn't change anything, but it was great.